Good evening. Thank you for being here this evening. We really appreciate it. Tonight's information session is about learning about our residential permitting process. So my name's Linda Turner. I'm the County Administrator for Calvert County Government. I'm really excited to be here and delve into the permitting process and share new improvements that we have implemented to streamline it. We want you to leave here this evening with an understanding of what to expect when applying to a residential permit and the process as the request continues throughout the system and throughout the process. Before we get started, I just want to share a few expectations for tonight. This is an information session similar to the one we held back in September. It's just an opportunity for you to learn and ask questions. So during this session, you'll hear a presentation provided by the team. You've received cards, so if you have any questions, just write your question down on the card. You can waive it. We have staff that will come collect it, and after the presentation, our team will answer as many questions as we can. So tonight we have representatives from the following departments. We have Planning and Zoning, Public Works, the Health Department, Environmental Health, and Soil Conservation District. So together, these departments work together throughout the residential permitting process. You're going to hear one coordinated presentation to present the overview of the process. After the presentation, these are the panelists that will remain to answer your questions. So now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Jason Brinkley, who's our Director of Planning and Zoning.
Thank you, Linda. And she said I'm the Director of Planning and Zoning. I've been Director for about a year now, and one of the first things I did whenever I took over as Director is I actually met with staff individually and met with members of the public. And one of the frustrations that I think was shared across the board was some of the challenges in the permitting process, whether that's education, whether that's the process itself, whether that's regulations we have sometimes some control over and sometimes not control over. So that was one of the things that I think we've worked over the last year to try to tackle as a department, as a set of departments and reviewing agencies. And that's something I think we're going to talk about that process tonight. So as Linda said, this is kind of a two-part thing. There's the educational component of this is what it looks like going through the residential permitting process. And while these are some of the agencies, these are not always all of the agencies, depending upon where it's at in the process. And we're going to walk through that, and then we're going to walk through some of the improvements that we have implemented, and some of the ones that are on the horizon, a teaser, if you will, of what's to come. And let's see if the PowerPoint works for me. Yes, success. Step one. So, what is the purpose of permitting? And I think to understand the purpose, you got to step back and think, what is the purpose of any regulation at all? And that is to provide for health, safety, and welfare of the citizens and of the county. And that's done collectively through the comprehensive plan, which is kind of the overarching goal of zoning and of the permitting process, or of permitting. And then it's like a Smith Island cake. There's so many layers to that that really dive down through there. And so that's the main focus of permitting is health, safety, and welfare. And second is to plan for and hopefully achieve attractive communities with adequate infrastructure and public services. So you hear a lot about adequate services, adequate public services. You hear a lot about that on the development review side, which is kind of a separate side of permitting, but it's also important at the permitting side as well. And as with any process, you want to ensure that it's fair and consistent approach to property rights, because we are dealing with property rights here, and development and established uses. And so I think that's the goal of any permitting, is to create a level playing field so that there is no favoritism for one person or the other. If somebody comes in, whether it's somebody you know, somebody you don't know, that everybody is treated equally and fairly in the eyes of the law. And something that I've really tried to stress with my team is, we deal with a lot of regulations. It's as simple as that. And a lot of times that's frustrating to your individual homeowner or landowner that's looking to do something. So although often we can't just say yes, we can find a way to get to yes. We can help them through that process to find a way to say, hey, maybe you can't do it this way, but collectively let's work to get you what you want, to get you that desired need you want. And that's achieved through the permitting process and with the help of the agencies here tonight. And something else I've tried to instill with staff is there's a baseball term, and I don't know that it actually applies as much as it should, but tie goes to the runner. So tie should go to the applicant. If there's a way to interpret that regulation, to interpret that in the best way that within the eyes of the law, we should be doing that as staff. And I think that's because we are impacting landowners' rights and we are impacting our communities. So we should be trying to find a way to help that individual achieve the goals that they're wanting to achieve. And all of that is accomplished through permitting. As I said, these are not necessarily all of the reviewing agencies. These are the ones that are housed in this lovely building we're in, but these are not the only ones. And I really appreciate everybody being here tonight. We also have some other members of my staff and DPW staff as well here. But that it's a collective effort amongst multiple reviewing agencies to make that happen. And it's not just one particular agency, whether that's any one of ours, that we're collectively here to work through this process and to be part of the community and be part of the team. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to the first presenter, that's is Beth Rimmer.
Thank you, Jason. I am Beth Rimmer, the Zoning and Permitting Division Chief, which is a relatively new role for me. I've been in that position about 6 months, but have been with the county working for planning and zoning for about 20 years. So I do have experience. So one of the biggest questions is always what requires a permit? What requires a permit and inspection? So let's break that down. So new residential dwellings, you're building a new house. You need a permit for that. Additions to those dwellings, accessory structures on your property. So we're thinking sheds, pools, pool houses, different aspects like that. You're also obviously required to get permits for non-residential structures, which would be your commercial building, new shopping centers, all of that. Alterations to either of those, to your house, if you're doing remodels to your house, moving walls, relocating rooms, you're going to need a permit for that. Commercial uses, so you may be moving into a space but not proposing any modifications, but the use could be changing, the use could be staying the same, but you still have to obtain a permit to use and occupy that space once it's become vacant. The construction of towers, and then in addition to the construction of towers, the antennas. So every time a new antenna goes up, every time they swap antennas out, co-locations. So all of the different antenna companies, each time they put new towers, each time they upgrade their equipment, they have to obtain permits for that. The trades, so the electrical, plumbing, and gas work that go along with the construction at your dwelling or the commercial, places throughout the county, that trade work has to be permitted, and that has to be done by licensed masters in those trades. Demolition of structures, also you have to obtain a permit. There are certain levels of inspections that have to happen when you're demoing. It can be as simple as we need to see if the house was habitable before it got demolished, but there's also sediment erosion control, different things that have to go up once you start breaking stuff down and moving it around. Soil conservation can talk a little bit more about sediment erosion control a little bit later. Exterior modifications. So exterior modifications, if you are putting windows in and they're larger than the existing windows, same thing with doors. If you're adding awnings, all those different types of exterior modifications do require permits and inspections. Signage, so wall signage, freestanding signs, different kind of signage throughout the county, that a lot of times it can also include lighting, so electrical permits along with that also are required. Removing vegetation, so that's removing trees, clearing, grading, and moving dirt around. All of those things do require permits and inspections. So the next biggest question, which is why? which Jason touched a little bit on this earlier. So why do I need a permit? So let's start with public safety. And there's a few different facets to public safety. So public safety from the standpoint that while you're out and about in Calvert County at your favorite restaurant or your favorite store and getting to and from those places, that you're safe. As well as the fact that our public safety department is included in our permitting process, so they're completely up to date on our new subdivisions, our new homes, and as those homes and new businesses are occupied and opened, so if God forbid there's an emergency, they're aware of where things are, they're aware of where houses are being occupied, and they can get there quicker and have faster response times. So there's a lot to that as well, which Jason touched on earlier, to maintain fair and equal property rights. We also have to ensure compliance with not only local laws, so beyond Calvert County laws, there's also state laws and federal laws that we're required to adhere to and regulate on their behalf. So some examples of this are critical area requirements, forest retention requirements, and stormwater management requirements, which you'll hear more about from DPW a little bit later in the presentation. Compliance with the zoning ordinance, which governs things such as property setbacks and permissible uses. You also are required to get permits to make sure that you're compliant with building, electrical, plumbing, and gas codes, which are the standards that have been adopted for construction in Calvert County. We also require permits to ensure that the plans, when they're required, are prepared by, and the work when it's completed, are both done by licensed professionals. So we're thinking about licensed engineers, architects, and licensed contractors and tradesmen. The process is next. So to determine if a permit, the process is to determine if a permit is required and what level of plan is needed. So do you need we refer to as a plot plan, which is a little bit more simple? Is a site plan required, which is when we get into that development that Jason talked about, which that's more on larger level commercial development. But if you have a large piece of property and you want to subdivide it, there's that whole subdivision process as well. Speaking specifically about permits, what level of plan is needed? Do we need a floor plan? We can go over all of those things. If you're not sure what's required, we do have really great guidelines on our website that basically breaks down do I need a permit and what is required, and you can basically click on your description of work and just kind of go right down, and it'll give you these are the submittal requirements for that. If you're still confused, please call us. That's what we're there for. We're happy to go over it, explain it to you. There's always some stuff that's a little outside of the box and it doesn't, you're not sure if it fits in. That's why we're there on a daily basis, is to assist you guys. Then there's the submittal of the application package. There are fees that are due for submittal. They take care of the actual application processing and some of the initial reviews. We then do an intake review. As long as you have all of the required documents they're asked for normally with that submittal, then it gets forwarded on to distribution for the review agencies. Now, that really is dependent. Where is the property located? What kind of infrastructure does it have? Is it on a well and septic? Is there available public water and sewer? How complicated is the project? Am I only doing an interior remodel? Then we don't have to talk about stormwater management. We don't have to talk about a whole lot of other, parts of the process. So who's going to review it is completely dependent on where are you located and how complicated is the project will basically, whether your plans have to be more in depth or whether more review is required. If you don't make it through the first round, you're going to get comments back from all of the agencies at the same time. You have the option of going on and looking at the portal so you can kind of see reviews as they happen in time. We have our first review is a 2-week window. So within 2 weeks, you're going to get your first review comments. We wait until all the comments are given from all the reviewers and then send them out in a package. So you would receive that via email. And that is so you can address all the comments at once. So you're not, sometimes the comments, you would have to make a change that you have to work both of those things into the same plan. So that's why we try to send everything out at the same time. That's not always necessary. Sometimes they come through. It's wonderful for us if we can approve it the first go round and you're getting your permit within a couple of days. If you do have to resubmit, you resubmit through the portal or you resubmit in the office. It comes back to us for re-review and approval. You're approved that second round, great. You're going to get you're going to get information about what your next steps are for payment and issuance, and then you move on to inspections. And so up next to talk about the permitting process is Danielle Rio, our residential permit coordinator.
Thanks, Beth. Hi, everybody. I am Danielle Reel. As Beth said, I am the residential permit coordinator here up in the county. And we're going to go over some of the processes in the permitting process, of course. Isn't that great? So the application, that's what we're going to start with. That tells us exactly what's going on. It's a very generic form. It covers a lot of different components. So as we've talked about before, we have demos, we have additions, we have new homes, we have fences, pools. This application covers all aspects of permitting. So it's not just very tailored to one project. It's for everybody. With this information on the application, we're looking for who owns the property. Where is it at? You might not live at the property that you're doing work at. Who's your contractor? For residential building permits, we can only list a licensed MHIC contractor. So if you want a handyman or your brother's going to help you, that's great. But if they don't have a license, we can't put them on the application. You can share the information with them, but we cannot put them on there. Some of the other information, we're looking for square footage. If you're doing a basement on a new home or an addition, is it finished, unfinished? All these things come into play. It might be a lot of information of, well, why do you need it? Well, all of our beautiful reviewers need this information to help them as smoothly do their job and review your permit. If we don't have it, we're going to kick it back, unfortunately, to get this information. So environmental health can determine what's going on with the well and septic if they have it, if they need any changes to it. If we're going outside, are there going to be footers? Engineering and DPW, they care. We don't want to mess up stormwater management. All the things come together. It's just a lot of information that we're asking for. With the site plan, if it's an exterior project, fences, decks, porches, garage, shed, we need to see where it is on the property. From that you would draw on a site plan or an aerial plan of the property, it needs to be to scale. From that structure, we need distances to 2 property lines, the closest 2 that are adjacent to this project. Distances to the well and septic if the property has well and septic on it. Again, this helps the reviewers do their job as quickly and efficiently as they can to make sure that it's not going to inhibit other things for setbacks and locations. So recorded plats and title history, it's used more for new homes to make sure which is in planning and zoning, not public works. They need to know this information. Some things are zoned certain ways. There could be building restriction lines, forest conservation. Every property is different and unique, which is wonderful. But having this plat helps them know where a house can go and if you're setting within setbacks. Floor plans, architectural plans, depending on what it is. If you're doing interior renovations, we want to see what's going on that level of the home. We don't necessarily need to see every label or all the levels of the home, rather, with every room labeled. We don't need pictures. We don't want to know what's in your house. We just want to know where the flow is. For various reasons, we are looking at safety. We're making sure that there's access. And again, if you're doing people call them in-law suites or apartments, we want to make sure where that access is, okay? So it's not that we want to be nosy. We just want to make sure it goes through easily. So we do want all rooms labeled. Architectural plans, this is if the project is located within a town center. There are additional regulations that have to go into play for the reviewers. So they need to see the elevations if we're doing outside changes, because sometimes it matters what it might look like. Wrong way. Agency reviews. So as Jason and Beth have kind of touched base, there's multiple different reviewers and agencies that get involved with the permitting process. We have environmental health. They're checking out the well and septic regulations to make sure that it's in good health and that we're not encroaching, because we don't want to, nobody wants to replace their septic systems. I know this personally. We don't want any issues with that. So we want to make sure the health is good and it's not going to be in your drain fields or inhibit them. Zoning, they're making sure that we comply with the ordinance. They went through a giant overhaul in the ordinance not long ago. So there's some changes that are actually more beneficial, which is great. So we want to make sure everything is covered, that you're without the setbacks, because we don't want our neighbors too close to us on their property. We want to respect the boundaries too, right? Department of Public Works, water and sewer. If the property has public water and sewer connections, they might need to look at the permit to make sure the additional water for use depending on what's going on or sewage that's going out. They're not here with us this evening, just so you know. We don't have water and sewer here in the building tonight. The other part of Public Works is we have engineering. So they're ensuring compliance with stormwater management ordinances, state design manual, as well as county road ordinance. So they're looking at a lot of different things too. So topography, the slopes, they got a lot of stuff to look at. And we want to make sure everybody's property stays healthy. Soil conservation, compliance with sediment erosion control ordinance. So same thing, they want to make sure that things aren't eroding away. Okay. All right, so next up we have Abby with environmental health.
Sorry, I gotta readjust here. Okay. So like Danielle said, my name's Abigail Lingenfelter. I am the Well and Septic Program Supervisor with the Calvert County Health Department, Division of Environmental Health. Been in the position for about 10 years. So our main goal is to ensure that all properties and building permit applications are compliant with the Code of Maryland Regulations, or COMAR 260402 and 260404, which are the well and septic regs. The majority of Calvert County, as you guys all know, is served by well and septic, and Danielle mentioned we just want to ensure that all properties are not going to damage their existing, no one has existing issues on the property and things like that also before moving forward. All building permit applications, we're looking for setback requirements. You can see a small chart here with the most common building permit application types and the setbacks from both the well and the septic. There are some variances that can be approved to lesser than what is required by the state, pending submission of a variance request form to my office, which will be reviewed by us and the Maryland Department of the Environment, which is the state agency that writes all the regulations we have the pleasure of enforcing. Typically during plan review, like they had mentioned, we're looking for setback distances on your site map to scale. So if you're 29 feet, 25 feet from your well, we want to make sure that that's on there to ensure that any variances that do need to be applied for are done properly. Ideally, you're more than far enough away from your stuff so that it's a non-issue, but we do understand that some properties don't have the space necessary to make that happen. We also, with certain building permit application types, are looking at the adequacy and functionality of the existing well and septic. That's going to be more so your finished basements, your in-law suites, additions, stuff like that. Anything that's an increase in living space to the property that could be considered a reasonable foreseeable increase in sewage or wastewater or water flows to the home. When applications like that are received, you can sometimes have additional requirements that are necessary, sometimes a septic inspection by a third-party licensed inspector, percolation testing or water sampling of the potable water may be required. If anything like that is necessary, then we certainly reach out to the applicant upon review and let you guys know what the steps are moving forward. We do, because we know that a lot of times environmental health is kind of a hurdle to jump through. We do offer concept plan review if you don't want to jump straight to the building permit application process and have any of that back and forth. You can submit a plan directly to our office called a concept plan that just lays out exactly what you're wanting to do, and we can provide you those steps accordingly. That way, if you do need to do a septic inspection or there's any upgrades necessary, you can take care of that on the front end rather than having to wait for your application during the building permit process. I did mention variances briefly. There's something on the website that you can get as well if you need it. If you do need a variance request, then you need to be sure to put that specific distance on the request as to the reason why, and then you would submit that to our office directly, not through the portal. That way it can be reviewed by our appropriate review agency and then review it with the state as well. If for some reason it's denied, we obviously move forward with you from there and come up with a secondary plan. If approved, then we just have to ensure that your project meets that setback that has been approved accordingly. If you need information as to where your well and septic are located on your property, we have what's called a public information request form available on our website, calverthealth.org. You can fill that out online and send it in. Our clerical can pull your file, scan and email you what we have. Unfortunately, we're still kind of in the dark ages where that's concerned, so we are primarily paper files. So if you do need that information, feel free to submit that request. It can take several days to get back to you. Sometimes we get 5 a day, sometimes we get 45 a day. So it just depends on the workload for clerical, but they do get everything to you as quickly as possible. And we also have an FAQ document on the website, calverthealth.org, that if you have any questions, it lays out pretty decently what is on there. But like Danielle mentioned, every property in Calvert County is very unique. They have different topographical features, different soils, the dwellings are different, the system designs on every property is different, well depths are different. So each review is case by case. We do obviously apply the regs equally, but because every property is unique, sometimes, one person might be doing a finished basement and they get a septic inspection, another person might not need to do anything, another might need percolation testing and site plans. So they all vary depending on the specifics of what is existing on record. So that kind of goes back to that concept plan. If anyone has any upfront questions that they want to get answers to prior to formally applying, they're welcome to come in, let us know what they want to do, and we can help everyone accordingly. So that being said, I'll hand it back to Beth.
All right, thank you, Abby. So next up, we're going to talk about what do we do when we do our, what do we look at for our zoning review? So first thing is the property a buildable lot? Was it created as part of a subdivision, or is it a parcel of record, which that means that it existed as it is prior to our zoning, which if anyone is just happen to wonder what that date is, that would be June 29th of 1967. Next thing, setbacks. Is the proposed project meeting the setbacks? So setbacks there's a couple of different kinds of setbacks. There's primary setbacks, which are the setbacks that are established when your property is subdivided, or based on your lot size, it also differs. So primary setbacks are what your main dwelling unit has to meet, and then any structure that's 500 square feet or more also has to meet those primary setbacks. So obviously that's to give you and your neighbors a bigger buffer for those larger buildings, those larger projects. There are smaller reduced setbacks for smaller accessory structures. Just using an example, a shed that's 300 square feet, it has to meet whatever your front setback is, but it only has to meet a 5-foot setback on the side and rear. So just to give you guys an idea, an example of that. Parking requirements, even single-family dwellings have parking requirements. Currently, you have to have 2 parking spaces for any single-family dwelling, so we have to make sure that you have that area, that your driveway is large enough, or that you have included a garage with your submittal. Code enforcement will look at it if you happen to start doing your project before you got a permit and you got in trouble. Someone showed up and said, hey, code enforcement is going to be part of that review process when your permit does come in. They're going to make sure that whatever you have applied for, working with the rest of the agencies, that what you've applied for covers whatever the violation was. Hopefully before it gets to the point where you have to actually start paying fines and stuff. We try to do whatever we can to not get to the point where we're ending up in court and stuff over stuff like that. Architectural requirements, if you're in town centers, there are particular architectural requirements that are required for certain designs. They can differ a little bit depending on which town center it is that you're talking about. There's also agricultural review. So if you have a property and you've chosen to put it in any of the ag preservation districts, there's going to be a review. There's a little bit more of a review on what you're allowed to do, where you're allowed to put things on that property. So that can be part of your review if you're doing improvements to what would be considered a farm. There's critical area review. So if your property is located within 1,000 feet of a tidal body of water, there are state requirements and federal requirements for floodplain that have to be addressed during that review, as far as lot coverage and different things like that. Cultural resources review. So if your property has if your property is of a certain age or is in our historical preservation program, there's different review levels that have to happen there. And then also, if it just so happens that your property is located in an area that there's a good chance that there's going to be artifacts that are found that are of some kind of historical significance, we're going to ask that you make sure that you look for that while you're breaking ground, digging. If you are taking down a building that is of a certain age or older, even if we don't choose to put it in historical preservation, they do still like to take pictures to maintain that history. Just to maintain the history of Calvert County, we like to have some written record and some photographs of the different older buildings. Last but not least, we look at environmental impacts, what we now refer to as the natural resource protection areas, and those would be steep slopes, streams, wetlands, forest retention areas, and any other conservation areas or buffers that are required for any of those really environmentally sensitive areas. And so with that, I will pass it off to Lindsay Halterman, who is one of the residential experts for engineering review.
Okay, so at Department of Public Works, we ensure project compliance using the Stormwater Management Ordinance, the Road and Site Development Ordinance, construction standards, and the Stormwater Design Manual. We review the design plans and calculations to verify compliance with these county and state requirements. We evaluate grading and development plans to ensure new development does not adversely impact existing roads, drainage systems, or neighboring properties. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have about residential permits. And now I will turn this over to Jason Levitt with the Soils Conservation District.
Good evening. As Lindsay said, my name is Jason Levitt. I'm the district manager of the Calvert Soil Conservation District. And I'd like to take a couple minutes to discuss the participation of the district in the procedures that become the residential permit. So basically, we review for and we ensure compliance with the 2016 Sediment and Erosion Control Ordinance. In addition to that, the district does have delegated authority from the Maryland Department of the Environment to ensure that the designs, construction, maintenance are in conformance with the 2011 Maryland Standards and Specifications for Soil Erosion and Sediment Control. In the residential permitting process, generally this manifests itself as perimeter sediment and erosion controls. We also, the reasoning for the perimeter controls ultimately is to ensure that steep slopes and waterways are protected from sediment-laden runoff, and also to protect roadways from track out, which is pretty much when there's sand, dirt, soil, debris leaving a construction site that's carried out onto a paved public roadway. That's pretty much why we have stabilized construction entrances. And that's about it for us. And next I'll turn it over to Mr. Joe Hawkshurst from Inspections and Permits.
So my name is Joe Hawkshurst. I am the Inspections and Enforcement Division Chief and also the county's building code official. And we're getting close to the end. Once the review process is complete, there are some final steps that must occur before the permit can be issued. Reviewers may set some pre-issuance conditions, such as delineating forest retention areas in the field and recordation of certain documents, which would include stormwater management and floodplain requirements. Next, the construction documents are reviewed to assure that they are consistent with the approved scope of work and to make sure they contain all the necessary approval stamps. The final step is the calculation of permitting fees, and once those fees are paid, a permit is issued and construction of the project can begin. Oh, sorry, I didn't do that. It's the responsibility of the permit holder to request inspections at the various stages of construction and before any work is concealed. Inspectors have many years of experience in their respective trades, and our electrical and plumbing inspectors hold master's licenses. The inspections they perform identify potential safety hazards and code violations, and those must be corrected before construction continues from that stage. This ensures the structural integrity of the building and that electrical, plumbing, and life safety systems are properly installed and functioning. Completing the inspection process protects the occupant's health and safety and results in approval for use and occupancy of the structure. And that is the end.
Thank you, Joe. So now let's talk a little bit about some process enhancements. And before we do that, I think it's important to note that 2025 was the first year that we actually had more submissions online than we did in person. And I think that that trend is going to continue as both as the system gets better and just as the nature of life goes that direction. And as part of that, and as I mentioned earlier, one of the highlights of when I took office, I'm not running for anything. When I took over as director is challenges to the process. And that's both internal challenges and just challenges by, as you can see, it's a complex process. And there's frustration on all sides. So how can we alleviate that? We can't always change the rules, but we can update the process. And that's really what we've tried to do over the past several months. And a lot of it is focused on updates to our land management software, which is IPS. And that's used to track all permits, agency reviews, and inspections. And we did what I would say is pretty close to a comprehensive update throughout the department. And that also impacts the development review side, which we hinted at tonight, but we didn't cover fully. And really bringing in all the different types of reviews they talked about into that system where it should flow a lot more smoothly, and it should get alerts. You should get alerts more readily as that process happens. And that's both internal alerts, hey, I've got a review that needs to happen, and external alerts from the applicant, hey, this has been reviewed. So the plan is for all that to flow much more smoothly. And I think one of the successes that we can already point to, and this has been live for just a couple of months, is we've really, when it comes to trades, electrical and plumbing, we've really increased the expediency of reviews for electrical. And Joe might tell you a different story. So Joe, just accept the numbers I'm going to give here. But at times it was taking a few weeks to review electrical permits, and that's not by fault of our guys reviewing electrical are working their butt off. It's just complex system and backlog. To now we're down to less than a week on average, I believe, in reviewing electrical. So we were able to take that and cut it by 2/3 to just a third of the review time. And I think we can be even faster on those as it continues to as we continue to work and fix some of the kinks and bugs in the system. That I think we have to adopt a series of always improving that system, because there's always changes to the law, there's changes to the process, and we have to continue to improve as we go through. And one of those is, and I know Beth, as she mentioned, took over in her position just within the past 6 months or so, is coming up with checklists on the front side of that checklist. Excuse me. So every time, and I've already killed off my slide, it's time to go home. Every time you submit, it gets sent out to these reviewing agencies, and they may have comments. Well, there's some of that we can correct if to help you make sure you submit a complete package may save you a review cycle or two and cut down your permitting time by weeks. And so we need to be able to have that on the front end, that here's your checklist of what you need to submit, so that when you review it, that there may be comments, but the comments are not, you don't have this document, you don't have that document, that all of a sudden restarts that process and takes forever to go back through. So there's a lot that we can do collectively, working closer with the public to make sure that those are full submissions, and that we, as much as possible, get it right the first time, so that you get your permit and we can move on to the next person to help them get their permit. And I think that that's a good time to, and I think it says considering on here. Okay, it does. So one thing that we are finalizing is a fast track process for, and it's not going to be for all residential permits, but for things like decks and sheds and things that you should be able to walk in and out in one day. is we're really finalizing that process. And it really helps not just with the improvements to the system, but being in this building. Everybody here is in this building, and these are your main people reviewing your project, so that you can walk in and out in one day if you need to get a deck or something. And it may not be everything, because as Beth pointed to, each individual lot, or it may have been Danielle, each individual parcel is unique, so it may not apply to everybody. But if you can get in and out in a day with your permit, I think everybody's happy on both ends. And we're going to get back to that. We had something I think called Fast Track Wednesdays. We're finalizing that process now, and that's something that we need your help to see what that feedback is on how to make that process better. And it's not just to prove our permits, it's how can we improve the system as well. And another thing that, and I know they've hit on it, but we are happy to set up an appointment to meet with you, to talk through your project, kind of almost a pre-concept meeting, similar to what happens on development review. So for you to ask those questions and know where those potential roadblocks would be before you spend tens of thousands or more dollars to get to where you need to be, knowing that, hey, this is a red flag you may want to be aware of, or this is something you may want to consider. It will help with faster review times. It will help with you getting your permit much faster, and it'll help on both ends. And that's something that I want to make sure everybody's aware of you can do, is absolutely set up a meeting with us. And I think we're even working on how to do that, where you can go online to hit where you can set up a schedule meeting online as well. And the last thing I'll highlight on, it's my Texan coming out, guys, is we just went live a few days ago with a dashboard on inspections and permits, our website, that says how many permits we reviewed last month. And I wanted to make sure to get that out before this meeting to be able to talk about it, but we're continuing to evolve that. So here in the next few weeks, you should be able to see what's the average review time for each one of those permits. So you can know somewhat what you may be anticipating for reviews. And that doesn't necessarily always mean approval, because every situation is different. But what can I anticipate each review cycle taking for different permits? So we're in the process of kind of getting that done on our internal side now, but we have gone live with that dashboard. You can see what we had in February. You should be able to see at the end of March what we had for March. So you have an idea of, okay, kind of what's the backlog or what's the log looking like on how long or what is going through that process, and then eventually how long it takes to go through that process. And the last closing words I'll say is I want to thank everybody here for being here. It's probably the nicest day of the year so far, and we're in here. But thank you all for coming. Thank you to all of Calvert County staff and health department and everybody for being here as well. Thank you, Linda, for putting this on. We've got some questions and that were already submitted. If you have questions and you've got the little card, wave it in the air and somebody will come and get it, and we'll try to get to those. But the last thing before we get to the Q&A is we don't have a monopoly on ideas. If you've got an idea other than just don't enforce that regulation, if you've got an idea of how to make the system better, we're all ears. If you've seen something working better in another jurisdiction, I'm not saying it's going to work here because it's so complex, but if there's something, we will be happy to look into it. So you can help us make that process even better. And with that, I'll go to the few of the questions we have. And I know Rachel and Tamara are my deputies for planning and zoning. They're back there getting the questions. They'll bring them up to me here in a minute. But we do have a few. The first question we had, and I'll just provide the answer because is tonight's presentation going to be available? Yes, you can go to the YouTube channel for Calvert County Government, and it is available on our website. So if you have somebody that wants to watch it, by all means, share that link, and they'll be able to come back and watch it. So I drew the short straw of getting to ask the questions, but they have to answer them. So the first question is, do I need a permit for a prefab shed? And you may have to turn on that mic, and that may be a Beth question.
Hello. So for a prefab shed, If it's over a certain size, you do need a permit. The zoning ordinance and the building code basically exempt structures that are less than 200 square feet. So if that prefab shed is 200 square feet or more, it will need a permit and it will need inspections, and it will have to meet the required setbacks. If you are installing a prefab shed or a shed that is under 200 square feet, you do not need to get a permit for it. However, it is still required to meet the setbacks that we discussed earlier. So it would have to meet your front setback, and it would still have to meet that 5-foot setback from your side and rear property lines. There are steeper setbacks if you have environmentally sensitive areas on your property. If you're not sure, you just need to call us. We can help answer those questions for you.
So speaking of, that's,
And if you're in thank you, Danielle. And if you are in critical area, you need a permit for everything.
yeah.
Pretty much.
Full stop.
So, full stop.
So I think that answers the second question is, what are my setbacks?
So every property has different setbacks, and we talked about that a little bit earlier, that it depends on what the size of your property is, where your property is located. Is it in a highly intensely developed area? Those setbacks tend to be a little bit smaller. You can check your record plat if you have a copy of that. Also, if you recently purchased your properties, a lot of times a location survey is required. A lot of location surveys will show your primary setbacks on there. There are, like we said earlier, different setbacks for smaller structures. So if at any time you're not sure, give us a call or fill out one of the public information requests. We have a section on our website for that. So you would just have to fill your information out, and then we'll get back to you in a couple of days with that information.
So the next question is probably for Joe, just to give Beth a break. Do I need a permit for a fence?
In the critical area, yes. Just like Beth said, everything that's in the critical area requires a permit. Fences that are over 7 feet tall require a permit. So if you're 7 feet or less, it would not require a permit.
And then, since Joe still has that, and I think you've answered this in your slide, but who can call for an inspection?
Your building contractor or the property owner can call in for a building inspection. We require that the licensed contractor calls in their plumbing and electrical inspections.
And then, how many trees can I clear without needing a permit? That may be a Beth question.
Critical area. Any tree removal in critical area requires a permit. If you are hoping to remove any trees in what is a recorded forest retention area, you would have to obtain a permit for that. And there are instances where you would have to replant those trees because those are considered recorded no cut, no clear. If you are not in critical area, you can remove up to 20 trees as long as you are clear cutting them. Once you get into removing the stumps, either by grinding or by pulling them out and disturbing earth, you get into needing a grading permit. So it really depends on the intensity of the clearing and if it is going to also involve any disturbance. So again, if you have questions, that's what we're here for. Please just give us a call. We want to deal with it on the front end instead of the violation when your neighbor calls because your trees are all gone and there's dirt everywhere. So.
Those 20 trees still need a permit?
If you are not in critical area, you can remove up to 20 trees clear cutting without a permit.
And the next question, sorry, they're firing questions at me, and so I'm trying to figure out what order to take them in. So who can request and this may be more of an environmental health question, theoretically, who can request a concept review and at what stage in the process? You mentioned concept earlier.
I would recommend doing the concept up front prior to building permit submission. That's kind of the whole point, is that way if you have additional steps that you would have to take specific to our office, which oftentimes could mean percolation testing, upgrades or replacement of the septic system or water supply well, anything like that, you know that up front before you start the process with the county. In theory, anyone can apply for it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a contractor. A property owner can do it. I don't think we've ever had one from Joe Schmo next door for their neighbor's house, but in theory, anyone can apply for the concept plan.
So this is one I will take, which is who is the current critical area specialist? Ron Marney is still the critical area specialist at the moment. He recently took a different role as a division chief for our land management division, which was a kind of a conglomeration of our rural, our environmental, historical, all in one bucket. If anybody's ever seen TV show Landman, that's what we call him now. But we will be backfilling his role here. That announcement probably of that position will go out here in the next few weeks, I suspect. And then the next question is, so we do have Director Cosgrove here. And I think this might be best suited for him. I had to do this to get JR up here. But what is required of a structure to confirm the preservation of impact fees / water sewer taps?
As Jason said, I'm J.R. Cosgrove, Director of Public Works. Basically, what we've done in the past for that is you've had to show that you've at least had electric bill at that resident, I think, for the past 12 months. And there's some additional stuff also, not just that, but I know also it affects your front setbacks, which I think Zoni could probably clarify too, but I believe you also need at least, say, the front wall of the establishment there, so that just say, for instance, your front setback might actually be currently 50 feet, but the house was constructed, I don't know, half a century ago, and it's 25 feet off the road because the road is actually closer to the house than it was. You would need that existing structure there to be able to take advantage of that setback change, so you wouldn't be pushed back the full, say, 50 feet.
Okay. Thanks, JR. I'm just going in order on these. What is the status of the TDR program? You'll find out more. Stay tuned. We'll be back before the Planning Commission for a work session here in the next few weeks. That's kind of a off topic, but I wanted to answer it. Can a forest or retention area be developed? Boy, is that you, Beth?
A forest retention area cannot be developed. The only option that you would have would be to have another area on your property that you would be able to designate. So you would either have to have an area that already has trees on it, or a forested area that is not currently in forest retention, and then you would contact a civil engineer or a licensed land surveyor, and they would basically say, okay, we're gonna take this forest retention area away, and we're gonna move it over to here where it's already forested. Or you can do that same situation but propose a planting plan where, okay, we're gonna go ahead and plant this entire area. All of that work has to be bonded. The trees have to survive for a certain amount of time, and so you can redistribute it, but you have to maintain whatever is on your record plat. You have to maintain that amount on your property.
If there's no fee in lieu option per square foot instead of.
I am not the expert in forest retention area. I do not believe there is a fee in lieu, but we can certainly get your contact information after, and we can get back to you on that one.
There is for new, but I'm not sure about if you're moving it, if you're replatting it, whether there is. I'd have to check. I'm not the expert either. We can follow up with you afterwards. Oh, but we can still follow up with you afterwards. We're not that exclusive on that. This is a quasi-planning and zoning, quasi-environmental health question. Explain the ADU regs, maximum square foot, separate septic, bat system needed if in critical area, question mark. I'll answer the first part of that. ADU regs have a maximum of 1,500 square feet. That is largely set now by state law. It came in about 1-2 sessions ago and pretty much trumped everything that allows basically any single family dwelling that has the space for it to have an accessory dwelling unit. And the max is 1,500 square feet if it's detached. And then if it needs a separate septic, I'll turn that over to environmental health.
The only thing I will add to that is if you are the property owner, you do have to either live in the primary dwelling or the accessory dwelling unit.
Correct.
As far as the septic is concerned, rarely are systems over-designed enough to handle the capacity of the primary dwelling and the accessory apartment. Rare instances that is the case, but oftentimes you would either be required to install a new system that would be combined to service both properties or both dwellings, or you would have the option of installing a separate just for the ADU. You do, as part of that, have to do percolation testing, typically during the wet season, which normally is around this time of year, late winter, early spring, in order to establish what we call a 10,000 square foot septic recovery area. Every new dwelling is required to have one. If the existing property was built prior to 85 and does not have an existing 10,000, you're required to maintain the proper replacement area for the house, which is either an initial, which is what's existing, and one replacement, or an initial and two. So it just depends on when the property was developed. And then the ADU would have to have a 10,000 square foot area able of supporting an initial system and two replacements. Even if you're not using anything in that area, it has to have a 10,000, excuse me, a 10,000 square foot area established, combined system or not. But no, typically they're not, existing systems are not over-designed enough for an ADU. There's some sort of upgrade or replacement involved.
The next question is define a parcel of record. Is that a Beth question? I'm trying to give her the most question. Yeah.
Sorry. So I did touch on that earlier in the presentation. So if the parcel or property is existed prior to our zoning ordinance, which was established June 29th of 1967. Jason told me not to do that, but I promised my son I would. So
I didn't witness it, so it didn't happen.
So if that, then it is a parcel of record. It has to have existed and not been picked and pieces pulled out of it. It has to have been in existence since the beginning of our zoning ordinance.
The next somewhat related-ish question on parcels. Can you develop ag divisions, out parcels, or out lots? I don't know.
In any way, can you put a piece of concrete on an agricultural division? In St. Mary's,
Depends on what you mean by agricultural division.
piece of land cut out for, not for use as a dwelling. A platted division of land without any septic provision.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like a non-buildable parcel.
Yeah, like can it put a shed on? You could not in St. Mary's.
We allow agricultural structures to be built on those, as long as it is for agricultural purposes.
Then it would need a farm plan.
It would have to be an approved agricultural property. We don't necessarily do farm plans
Yeah.
here in Calvert.
So if it's an ag parcel, then for tax purposes, then yes. If not, then probably not. If you have a certain one, we could talk with you. Is this also not your question? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. The next one is for online application submittals, professional consulting versus individual. Who is setting up an account? So individual versus professional account.
Okay, so individual makes sense. It's you're the property owner, you own the property, you're an individual, you're looking for that. As a professional, if you're an LLC, if you're a contractor, you'd want that. So the wonderful thing about the online portal system is, even our current IPS system, is it's all driven off of emails. So if you are trying to separate your personal entity versus your company, you need to use two different email addresses to have as a portal contact, and that's how we would contact you. Yes, you can have both on the same property. Say, for instance, you own it, but you're, using it as an LLC or something to the effect of, you can have both listed. That's fine. You can invite applicants via the online portal when you're applying for permits. So when it comes to trades, you're master, plumber, electrician apply for it, they can invite the homeowner. They can invite the builder if it's a new home. They can invite people to permits. But individual, exactly as it sounds, commercial entities that, but again, the situation came up not that long ago with a lady. She purchased it, it's her husband's name, but she's putting in an LLC. And she's like, I don't want my name on it. It's the same email address. She has to provide me a second email for me to create up her professional identity on the portal.
Okay. Is there a database of previously permitted site plans? Not that I'm aware of. I mean, if you have a certain parcel that you have a question about, we may have it in our records somewhere, but we don't have a public-facing database. The next one is for DPW. Are stormwater as-built required for residential developments?
No, they are not.
That's way too easy.
Is there a particular project you want to talk about, or
That was the question.
typically it's just for commercial?
No, the thing in St. Mary's, now we gotta do stormwater management as-built
Okay.
for every stormwater facility on the guidelines. So you don't have that here.
Correct.
The next question for environmental health. Are environmental health approvals required prior to online submission of a permit application, comma, what if the plan changes, question mark?
They are not required prior. That's, if you opt to do the concept, then it's just that, a concept. If you guys make changes to that for your building permit submission, then we review everything as part of the county process. We're one of the agencies that do the review for each cycle. So if you guys apply and we approve everything, but DPW has a revision, then when that comes back through, we'll review everything again. So we're just part of that typical county process, unless you opt to do the concept plan prior to. Again, if it changes from the concept plan during building permit submission, you may receive different steps from us in order to move forward.
And since Jason Levitt hasn't had to answer one, I'll let him answer this one. So, because I'm taking the heat off of DPW answering this. DPW and Soil Conservation District both review for grading. What is the difference? Since you've worked in both, I'm going to let you answer this.
So I guess there are different reasons that we're looking at the grading. For sediment erosion control, a lot of the perimeter controls are based on the drainage area, the slope, the contributing area, like all of those things. DPW does consider a lot of those same particular characteristics, but realistically from a sediment erosion control standpoint, all we're looking at is the prevention or minimization, or, I mean, ideally the prevention of sediment movement outside of the limit of disturbance. I will let DPW talk to their bailiwick because that's them.
Fair.
Okay, so what exactly is the question? Just want to talk about grading?
So yeah, what's the difference between the two different review types for
Okay,
grading?
so when we review grading plans for stormwater management plans, we're reviewing environmental site design. So those are dry wells, rain gardens, microbial-retentions, rooftop disconnects, non-rooftop disconnects. So those are mandated by the state, and the county implements that review process through the county permit. So if there's any questions you have about that, I can answer more.
So follow up on that, does DPW have a threshold to earth moving that requires a separate permit? If you're moving so many cubic yards of dirt, is a permit required?
A separate permit?
A grading permit.
A separate, can you elaborate, please?
Bonding required.
Director Cosgrove?
So as far as separate grading permit, when you submit for a residential permit, you're submitting both for building permit and grading permit. Grading permits are required when anytime you disturb more than 5,000 square feet and or 100 yards of dirt. So pretty much anytime you're building a house, constructing a pool, anything like that, generally you're going to need a grading permit. Separate sidebar to that is if you're disturbing more than 5,000 square feet, it does kick in stormwater management requirements.
Yes.
So that's still separate, so you still need a permit for that. But it is 100 yards or 5,000 square feet kicks in a grading permit need.
And then there's no cap to the amount of earth moving after the 100 yards.
No, no. The only thing that kicks in, and this really wouldn't come into effect with a single-family residential permit, but there is restrictions that you can't open up more than 20 acres at a time. But generally, that's not going to kick in for what we're here discussing tonight. That's more if you're constructing the entire subdivision or a large commercial site. And to elaborate a little bit more about the question about the difference in grading, like Lindsay's saying, that Public Works is more viewing it for the drainage patterns to make sure that the grading is working, so we're not flooding the house. It's going around to say the area wells for the basement. It's not flowing into the walkout for the basements, and the water is flowing towards the stormwater device. And we're not directing additional flow onto your adjacent property because, once you develop a site, you're increasing runoff from that site versus when it was wooded. So we want to make sure that you're not increasing that drainage to your neighbor's property and causing adverse effects on them. So that's a slight difference. I mean, we're still looking at the same as far as soil conservation, making sure, you're not affecting neighboring properties. Theirs is more for sediment leaving the site. Ours is more not affecting it after construction and down the road.
Makes sense.
Next question is, I'm going to leave it with Beth there. I think you can probably answer this one. Why are setbacks in CRE closer to the road on the long and short lots, therefore leaving less room for cars? Essentially, how were they set?
So for our reviews in Chesapeake Ranch Estates, it is a 15 front setback is your front setback, and then depending on the side and rear setbacks on most properties in CRE, unless multiple properties were combined and it was replatted, is a 5-foot setback on side and rear. There are, of course, properties that are corner lots, and if you're on a quarter lot, that means that you have 2 front setbacks, so both front facing are going to be that 15 feet. But please remember that your front property setback is measured from your front property line, which doesn't include whatever your right-of-way is.
So the next couple of questions are for environmental health. Is what determines environmental health requirements? Is it bedrooms or living space?
We are currently total square footage of living space. We switched from bedrooms back in 2018. I will see that MDE would like to see us go back to bedrooms. We have not heard official word of that, though, so until they tell us to stop, we're doing total square footage of living space.
Just go ahead and hold it right there because I got a few more. If a well and septic that is open in environmental health has my tax ID/parcel number, can someone else use these permits? I'm assuming that means they may sell. They would have to start over.
Yes, they would have to apply. We no longer issue permits to property owners themselves. They are issued to contractors. However, we do have to have current property owner information on those applications. So if the property changes hands during that process, then the new owner would have to apply so we have their information.
So the next 2 questions are essentially the same thing. Is can a property receive a permit or be subdivided with an open well and septic permit?
Cannot be subdivided. You would have to close out any permit applications that are open in order to move forward with that. And what was the first part? I'm sorry.
Can it receive a permit or be subdivided?
You also cannot receive a permit. We're going to make sure that typically when there's an open permit, it's either new construction, meaning that there is no current well or septic system, or it means that the existing system has failed, which is why you guys have applied for a replacement system. So if there is an open, what we call sanitary construction application, then that needs to be closed before you can move forward with anything else.
And then I think that may be all of the questions that I have here. So with that, I think this concludes tonight, unless Linda has anything further that she wants to close out. But thank you all for coming. I hope this was educational, informational, and it helps put a face to the name, because the people you see tonight are actually the people that review your residential permits. And so you now know who to track down if you got a question, because I think that communication between the public and our departments helps for a smoother process. So once again, thanks for sacrificing a beautiful day outside to come in here and talk about permitting. So have a good evening.